Hello, everyone. My name is Nick Infernus, and welcome back to another comic book review. So, tomorrow afternoon, I'm going to go see Spider Man Across the Spider Verse. So, I figured why not just get this one over with since I've had this series pretty much completely finished as far as viewing goes. So, let's finish off as I turn down my volume because I just realized it's way up. Runaways Season 3. Now, I'm going to do something a little bit different with this one. I'm going to talk about the first half of the season and then the second half of the season. So, episodes 1 through 5 and then episodes 6 through 10, because I'm not going to lie, they feel like they could have been completely different seasons and nothing would change. Which is probably my biggest issue with one of my big issues with the whole thing is that the second half doesn't even feel like a runaway season. I'm getting ahead of myself here. So let's just talk about the first half. The first half is meant to basically close out the whole arc with Jonah and the Gaborum race, and it's not the worst ending ever. It certainly could have been done better. I do think that it ends in a manner that's kind of abrupt, but there are some pretty interesting twists and turns that it takes. For one, especially seeing how being possessed by these aliens affects both Stacy and Tina, how their personalities are completely changed, and both actresses do a great job at portraying two separate characters. And same thing goes for Alex's actor, Renzi Feliz. As you guys know, I hate Alex, and yeah, he's still a douche in this first season. In not the first season, in this first half, but here there's actually more of an excuse for it since he's actually possessed by one of the aliens, and let me tell you, the alien that he's possessed by, Jonah's son, I think it was, an absolute menace. And Renzi Feliz plays it incredibly well. It's very threatening, very intimidating, and very, very different from Alex, from the performance he usually gives as that character. But I'd still say this entire season is Alex at his best in general. And another thing I really liked was with Zavin, who was very abruptly introduced at the end of season 2, but she does get a nice little arc, a nice little friendship with Molly, and of course that little arc I just mentioned where she reinterprets the prophecy that her people gave her, and in a sense kind of gets off of Carolina's back about the whole thing. And I do like how they kind of closed it off by saving all the different hosts of the Gaborum aliens, people who are being possessed, by basically going into the dark dimension and then going back out, even if it means having to save Alex for later. So it's a good first half. It is just kind of marred by, I'd say, the last episode feeling a little out of place and the final battle ending kind of abruptly. I'd probably give this first half a 3 out of 5. It's good enough, but there are definitely other seasons that have hooked me with their premise a lot better. So let's now talk about season 2. And this is, to me, a prime example of good ideas gone to waste. Because there are a lot of really good things here. There's, of course, Morgan Le Fay takes on a much bigger role after being teased in the first half of the season, and I think a little bit in season 2, but I can't remember. Of course, you have a witch's coven, you have these smartphones that basically alter the user's behavior, makes them very aggressive. You have Cloak and Dagger showing up, and one good thing is that they actually still feel like themselves, so that's definitely a relief. And you even have Morgan taking over the former members of Pride, and then them all teaming up at the end. It's a lot of very interesting ideas, and they all just come crashing down because this second half of the season is so boring. Like, you could give me as many cool ideas and set pieces as you wanted to. But if it's not executed well, then they're not worth a damn, and none of these ideas are worth a damn because the way the season is executed just makes it boring as heck. Like, I was not invested in this season at all, and there are even issues outside of that, outside of the fact that this half is just really boring. For one, the two romantic relationships from previous seasons in the Runaways just completely butchered. Let's just get over Nico and Carolina first because they're the more prominent one. These two are just constantly at each other's throats for reasons that are just way too unbelievable for those two characters, especially considering how close they were in season 2, how they had their own arc of the fallout of the midpoint in that season. But then you also have them fighting in this season, and it just doesn't feel right. You have Nico wanting to get rid of Morgan her own way, and Carolina protesting about it and not wanting her to go down that route. There's even one point in the season where, because they have their little argument, Carolina openly admits when they're kidnapped that she wishes Nico was here as much as she hates to admit it. Which makes no sense for that character because it's obvious these two love each other, so why do you hate to admit that you wish she was here? Especially when she's like one of the most powerful people on your team. As for the other one, Sigurd and Chase, because Chase technically betrayed the Runaways at the end of season 2, again, technically, I would not call it a betrayal because he had very personal reasons to go back to the parents. And he even gave them a heads up that the Pride was coming after them. It still doesn't change that the way they're portrayed here, it feels like season 1. It feels like they went back to their season 1 dynamic where Gert is in her little SJW phase, putting Chase down, being all misandric. I think that's the word. Yeah, misandric, that's the word. And Chase just constantly trying to win her back. There's even like this little love triangle with someone who's involved at Wizard. It's just a mess. Speaking of mess, the last episode is pointless. Like, I'm not even gonna lie here. The last episode, here's what I think happened. Behind the scenes, they realized that they only have 9 episodes worth of content for the season. So what did they do? Hey, let's just, kill off Gert. And then the last episode can be about Chase going back in time to save her life. Which didn't even have to be a full episode. Like, if you want to go that route, it didn't have to be a full episode. You could have just made that like a short. That could have just been like a short little episode. It didn't have to be like the 44-minute ones. And I'll admit, it's nice to see where the Runaways ended up after 3 years. Which I know that makes no sense. Like, Chase, 8 years later, goes back 5 years in the past to 3 years later, and then he teams up with those Runaways to go back 3 years into the past to save Gert. Yeah, that's all weird and confusing, but that's a lot of time travel stuff for you. And again, it's interesting, but this time it's brought down by the idea that it's just pointless. This last episode has no point, and it easily could have been just eradicated by either changing the way the last episode plays out, or just, end the series on Gert dying, which sounds awful, I know, but it's at least better than creating another pointless episode just so your characters can have a happy ending. So honestly, this has to be the most disappointing season out of all of these because it had such a good start. The start was so good. It actually felt like Runaways. It had, the characters were still likable. They still had all the chemistry. And then you get to the second half, it has all these interesting ideas, but it's so boring. It's boring with a pointless last episode, and any romantic relationships, any relationships in general, in the second half, just down the drain. Like, yeah, thanks. I actually cared about these guys for once, and you ruined it. Yeah, thanks a lot. Overall, this might sound a little unfair, but this is going to have to be a 2 out of 5 for me. This isn't the worst season for Marvel TV, but considering how the other 2 seasons played out, they certainly could have done a lot better, I think. Anyways, guys, that's going to be it for my review of Runaways Season 3. If you enjoyed, you know what to do. I'm not going to bore you with all the generic stuff. See you guys in the next video. Take care. Godspeed.